In the long run, people only achieve what they aim at. Therefore, it is better for them to aim at noble goals. Henry David Thoreau. Life is often not decided by our momentary desires, but by what we choose as our destination. A goal is like a lighthouse in the dark ocean. A ship cannot reach the exact source of light immediately, but it always moves in its direction. The same is true for humans. Even if the journey is winding, even if we are sometimes led astray by the storms of failure, fear, or doubt, we still ultimately draw close to what our minds constantly focus on. What a person believes they can achieve powerfully influences how they act every day. A person who sets low goals often unconsciously limits their own potential. They only take short steps because they think their path is inherently short. They do not dare to learn more, try new things, or accept risks because in their minds, the destination is not worth sacrificing more for. Conversely, someone with a grand goal views difficulties through a different lens. Obstacles are no longer walls blocking the way, but steps that must be climbed. Notably, a grand goal is not meant to guarantee great success. Its true value lies in transforming the person on the journey of pursuit. A person aiming to climb a hill may only develop enough strength to walk, but someone aiming to conquer a high mountain will force themselves to train their will, learn new skills, expand their vision, and discover abilities they never knew they had. Even if they have not yet reached the peak, they still stand at a much higher position than where they started. In life, many people fail, not because they set their goals too high and miss them, but because they set them too low and achieve them too easily. When vision is narrowed, potential is also gradually imprisoned, like an eagle born to fly in the vast sky, but confining itself in a cage just big enough to flap its wings a few times. It will never know the true strength of its wings. Allow yourself to aim for greater things, not out of arrogance, but out of the belief that humans always have the capacity to grow far beyond their current limits. A high goal is like lifting the soul above mundane worries, helping us live with direction, motivation, and meaning. Because after all, the future is not built on what we vaguely hope for, but on what we courageously aim at. And when we dare to look up at the peaks, we do not just change the outcome of our lives, but we also change who we are throughout that very journey. To die is nothing, but it is terrible not to live. Victor Hugo. Since ancient times, humans have always regarded death as the most terrifying thing. We build countless belief systems, philosophies, and sciences just to prolong life and delay that final moment. The most terrifying thing is not the day life ends, but that a person has never truly lived before it does. Death is only a moment. It arrives and closes everything. But not living is a state that drags on through the years. It is when a person exists without daring to pursue what they love, without daring to express what they believe in, without daring to step out of their comfort zone for fear of failure, rejection, or judgment. They are like a ship that is sturdily built but remains forever anchored in the harbor. It avoids the storms, but also never knows the beauty of the ocean. Many people still breathe, still work, and still go through each day, but their souls seem locked in an invisible cage. They postpone their dreams for a more suitable day, postpone happiness for a more stable future, and postpone their real life until time quietly slips away. From a psychological perspective, this is one of the most common human tragedies. We are often so afraid of loss that we accidentally lose life itself. To avoid suffering, we refuse to love. To avoid failure, we refuse to try. To avoid being hurt, we refuse to open our hearts. As a result, we avoid some pain, but we also lose countless experiences that give life its meaning. Living is not just the existence of the body. Living is feeling the joy of pursuing a goal, being moved by the beauty of life, daring to love, to make mistakes, to learn, and to grow. A candle is born to shine. If it is never lit, then even if it remains intact until the very end, that existence still carries a deep, lingering regret. The most terrifying thing is not when the heart stops beating, but when desire stops burning long before that. Because at the end of the journey, what makes people regret most is usually not the failures they experienced, but the opportunities never seized, the dreams never pursued, and the life they did not allow themselves to live to the fullest. The first and last thing you have to do in this world is to last in it and not be smashed by it. Ernest Hemingway. We are often taught to pursue success, fame, wealth, or grand achievements. However, life is not always a race to win. There are phases where the most important goal is not to move forward quickly, but simply to stand firm against the storms that want to knock us down. In those moments, survival is no longer a given, but becomes a quiet victory. People often evaluate themselves by what they achieve. They feel valuable when they win, and feel like a failure when they lose. But life operates under a different set of rules. There are battles where simply not giving up is already a victory. Like an old tree in a storm, it does not need to grow a few meters taller or sprout thousands of new leaves. The most important thing is that its roots still cling tightly to the earth, and its trunk still stands when the storm passes. True strength is not always shown through dramatic growth. Sometimes it is demonstrated by the capacity to endure and persist. We are drawn to stories of brilliant success, but rarely see the years of silent struggle behind them. Everyone will face periods of disappointment, loss, pressure, and unavoidable blows. Those are the times when life is like massive waves continuously crashing onto the shore. Nothing can stop the waves, but what decides each person's fate is whether they let those waves sweep them away. Interestingly, the ability to survive is not a sign of weakness or resignation. On the contrary, it is a form of the deepest strength. A person with inner strength is not someone who has never fallen, but someone who rises again and again after falling. They understand that life does not require perfection. It only asks them to keep walking. Each time they overcome a difficulty, they are like steel tempered in fire. Pressure does not destroy them, but gradually turns them into a stronger version of themselves. You do not always need to win every battle. You do not need to prove your worth with flashy achievements. The first thing you do when entering this life is to live, and the last thing, after all the upheavals, is also to keep living with dignity, will, and courage, because sometimes a person's greatest triumph is not conquering the world, but not letting the world beat them down. You never know how much you can do in your life. Jack Ma. We often live as a scaled-down version of ourselves. Most people evaluate their ability based on what they have already done, instead of what they are capable of doing. They look at the present as if looking at a still photo, when in reality, a human is a movie that is constantly unfolding. The limits we believe to be real are sometimes just lines, drawn by fear, habit, and a lack of self-confidence. Familiarity creates a sense of security, but it easily becomes an invisible cage. Many people live for decades within the same circle of thought, the same way of acting, and the same level of self-expectation. They believe they are only suited for a certain role, only capable of reaching a certain limit. But life constantly proves the opposite. Countless people who once thought they were weak became strong after adversity. Countless people who once considered themselves ordinary created extraordinary achievements when circumstances forced them to step further. Humans are like seeds buried deep in the ground. Looking from the outside, no one can guess whether it will become a small flower or a giant tree stretching tens of meters high. Even the seed itself does not know all the potential sleeping within it. Only when challenged by rain, sun, storm, and time are those latent abilities gradually awakened. Life operates in a similar way. Our greatest capabilities usually do not emerge in the comfort zone, but are discovered in situations that demand courage, perseverance, and adaptation. Humans often make the mistake of identifying themselves with their current state. They think that what they are now will determine what they will always be. But in reality, the brain has the capacity to learn, change, and develop throughout life. Each new skill, each new experience, and each challenge overcome expands the limits of our self-perception. What was once considered impossible gradually becomes normal. What once terrified us eventually becomes a part of our strength. The greatest regret is not failing when trying to do something grand. The regret is never fully discovering your own potential because you prematurely concluded that you couldn't. An eagle raised in a chicken coop might spend its entire life walking on the ground, never knowing its wings were born to reach the sky. Humans are the same. We often carry more potential than we imagine, but we only realize it when we dare to take one more step past the limit we once believed was the end. Do not be too quick to define yourself by what you have achieved today. Life is longer than your current failures and vaster than your present successes. Within every person, there always exist unexplored possibilities, unawakened strengths, and untouched peaks. And perhaps the most wonderful thing about life is that you will never know how much you can do until you have the courage to try. I don't think people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive. Joseph Campbell. We often say we are searching for the meaning of life, trying to discover the purpose of existence or seeking answers to great questions about life. But what truly moves people is not always the answers, but the experiences. Meaning is not found in dry definitions, but in the feeling of being fully alive in every moment of life. Humans are not only thinking creatures, but also feeling creatures. We do not remember our lives like a report full of logic. We remember it by the emotions we have experienced. A sudden rainy afternoon, a conversation that changes your mind, a failure that makes you grow, or a moment of love that stirs the heart intensely. It is these experiences that make up the fabric of life. They are like colors on the canvas of a person's life. If there is only theory without experience, life will be like a beautifully sketched painting that is never colored. Many people spend their whole lives searching for a formula for happiness or an absolute definition of the meaning of life. But life is not a math problem with only one correct answer. It is like a river that is always moving. Meaning does not lie in standing on the bank and analyzing the water, but in stepping in, feeling the current, and letting yourself become a part of that journey. A person can read hundreds of books about love, but will never fully understand love without having loved. A person can study thousands of pages about courage, but will not truly understand it until they face their own fears. People often think they need to find the meaning first and then start living. But reality works the other way around. It is living, experiencing, falling, loving, losing, and growing that gradually create meaning. Meaning is not a treasure buried somewhere in the future for us to find. It is like the footprints that appear behind every step. Only when looking back do we realize that seemingly ordinary experiences have quietly created value for our lives. The regret is that many people postpone living because they are too busy looking for the answers to life. They wait until everything is ideal to dare to start. They wait until they understand everything to dare to act. But life does not reveal its secrets to those who only stand and watch. It only reveals its beauty to those who dare to enter and experience it. Just as no one learns to swim by standing on the shore, analyzing the water, no one discovers the meaning of life without actually living. What the human heart yearns for most is perhaps not a complete definition of life, but the feeling of being fully present in that very life, to laugh when happy, to hurt when losing, to hope when in difficulty, to love and to grow. Because in the end, meaning does not exist outside of experience. It is the experience of living deeply, truly and fully that gives birth to meaning. Freedom is not the absence of commitments, but the ability to choose and commit to what is best for oneself. Paulo Coelho. Many people believe that freedom is being able to do whatever they want, controlled by no one, unbound by any responsibility or limit. That absolute freedom is often just an illusion. A boat without an anchor can drift aimlessly. A person without life principles is also easily swept away by momentary desires, impulsive emotions, or pressure from the surrounding environment. At that point, they think they are free, but in reality, they are being controlled by things they do not even realize. Humans always live in a web of limitations. We are limited by time, energy, circumstances, and the very nature of life. No one can walk every path at the same time. No one can have everything without a trade-off. An artist commits to daily practice. An athlete accepts strict discipline. A person who loves sincerely accepts responsibility and sacrifice in a relationship. On the surface, those things seem to limit them, but those voluntary limits are precisely what open up greater possibilities. The happiest and most mature people are often not those with the least responsibility, but those who find meaning in their commitments. They understand that every choice is simultaneously a letting go. When choosing a direction, they give up countless other directions. When choosing a life value, they give up things that do not align with that value. It is this conscious choice that creates a sense of ownership over life. Someone who cannot commit to anything often lives with a sense of insecurity and distraction, like a bird constantly changing direction in the sky, never reaching where it wants to go. Imagine a piano player, seen from the outside, practicing for thousands of hours, adhering to strict technique and repeating the same pieces of music seems like confinement. But that very discipline brings them a special kind of freedom, the freedom to express emotion through music. A person who rejects all discipline to maintain freedom can do whatever they like for a moment, but is incapable of creating anything of lasting value. The paradox is that true freedom does not come from avoiding responsibility, but from choosing the responsibility that aligns with one's deepest values. At that point, people are no longer victims of circumstance or slaves to fleeting desires. They become the drivers of their own lives. They know what is important, what is worth pursuing, and are willing to pay the price for that choice. Freedom is not a door that opens to infinite possibilities without any limits. Freedom is the ability to clearly recognize what is truly valuable, courageously choose it, and persistently commit to that choice. Because ultimately, humans are not defined by the number of choices they have, but by the quality of the choices they resolve to live with to the very end. Absorb what is useful. Discard what is useless. Bruce Lee. Life is not just a process of continuously acquiring more knowledge, experience, or wealth, but also the art of letting go. Many believe that growth comes from accumulating more and more things, but in reality, a great deal of mental strength is generated by the ability to filter. Just as a garden needs more than just planting seeds to flourish, it also needs weeds pulled. A life, to become meaningful, also needs to discard things that are quietly occupying the space of more important values. The human mind is like a room with limited space. Every negative thought, every unnecessary worry, every toxic relationship, or every useless habit takes up a piece of precious space. When that room is filled with things that no longer hold value, we begin to feel suffocated, disoriented, and exhausted. Notably, people often tend to cling to what is familiar, even when it no longer serves their growth. We hold on to old resentments, past failures, outdated beliefs, or no longer relevant goals, simply because they have become a familiar part of life. Wisdom does not lie in knowing a lot, but in the ability to distinguish what is truly important. A mature person is not someone who carries on their shoulders everything they have ever learned, experienced, or owned. They are someone who knows how to keep valuable lessons and let go of unnecessary burdens. Just as a mountain climber must reduce their luggage the higher they go, humans must also learn to let go of things that no longer help them move forward. This applies not only to material things, but also to thoughts and emotions. There are beliefs that once made us strong in the past, but have become limitations in the present. There are relationships that once brought joy, but now only bring fatigue. There are fears that once helped us be cautious, but now prevent us from growing. If we do not have enough courage to discard those things, we will be like a ship carrying too much unnecessary cargo, becoming slower and slower in the vast ocean. Interestingly, every proper letting go is not a loss, but a release. When discarding the unnecessary, we create space for more valuable things to appear. When giving up a bad habit, we clear the way for a good one. When letting go of negative thoughts, we make room for clarity. When giving up goals that are no longer suitable, we have more energy to pursue what truly matters. Life does not get better just because we have more, but because we know what is worth keeping. Maturity does not lie in filling the soul with everything we encounter on our life's path, but in the ability to refine, choose, and focus on what truly brings value. Because sometimes a person's greatest strength is not the ability to hold on, but the wisdom to let go of what is no longer necessary. We could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world. Helen Keller. Everyone wants an easy life, where every plan succeeds, every relationship is good, and every day is filled with joy. However, if life were truly woven only from pleasant things, it is very likely that humans would never discover the highest qualities latent within themselves. Courage does not appear when there is no fear. It is only born when a person faces fear and still decides to step forward. Similarly, patience does not form in moments when everything goes as desired. It is forged through long days of waiting, through efforts that have not yet yielded results, through periods when success seems still far ahead. If life consisted only of instant rewards, humans would not have the opportunity to develop resilience, persistence, and trust in the future. Picture a sword forged in a furnace. If the metal had never undergone harsh heat and continuous hammer blows, it would only be a crude block of iron. Pressure is what creates strength. Challenges are what create shape. Humans are the same. Difficulties are not always enemies of growth. Many times, they are the most demanding, yet most valuable teachers that life sends us. Interestingly, when looking back at the most mature periods of their lives, many people realize they learned the greatest lessons from the hardest times. A failure can teach them humility. A loss can help them understand the value of what they have. A long period of struggling with adversity can help them discover resilience they didn't know they possessed. Those experiences are like headwinds. They do not stop the bird from flying. On the contrary, they help its wings grow stronger. However, this does not mean that suffering in itself is desirable. Value does not lie in the pain, but in how we react to it. Two people can go through the same challenge, yet one becomes bitter while the other becomes stronger. Difficulty is only raw material. It is attitude and perception that decide whether it becomes a burden or a lesson. Mature people understand that they cannot control every event that occurs in life, but they can always choose how to face them. The challenges we meet are not just obstacles on life's path. Sometimes they are the path. If life were filled only with joy, we might feel more comfortable, but we would also be poorer in inner depth. It is rising after a fall that teaches us courage. It is silent days of waiting that teach us patience, and it is difficulties that help us realize a strength exists within us far greater than we ever thought. Life is a series of problem-solving opportunities. The problems you face will either defeat you or develop you, depending on how you respond to them. Unquote. Many people spend most of their time wishing that one day all difficulties will disappear, all troubles will be resolved, and life will finally become easy. But the truth is, life does not work that way. Every phase that ends opens up new challenges. Once a problem is solved, we usually encounter another one at a higher level. Life is not a journey to find a place without problems, but a journey to learn to face and solve them more wisely. Problems are not abnormalities appearing in life. They are an inevitable part of living. A seed must break its hard shell to sprout. A butterfly must struggle to emerge from its cocoon before it can fly. Humans are the same. Challenges are not merely obstacles on the path of growth, but are often the very path that leads to that growth. What makes the difference is not the number of difficulties a person faces, but how they interpret and react to those difficulties. Notably, the same problem can yield two completely different outcomes. For one person, failure is proof that they lack competence. For another, failure is data that helps them adjust their direction. One person sees adversity as a wall blocking the way. The other sees it as a test to develop skill and character. The problem does not change, but perception changes, and it is that perception that decides the final outcome. People often tend to focus on what happens to them instead of how they react to it. However, most of our strength does not lie in controlling circumstances, but in the ability to control our attitude towards circumstances. Life is like the ocean. We cannot command the waves to stop rising, We cannot ask the wind to always blow in the direction we want, but we can learn to adjust the sails. It is that adaptability that is the foundation of psychological maturity. The strongest people are usually not those who face the fewest difficulties. They are those who have learned to turn difficulties into lessons. Every problem they solve is like training a mental muscle. Initially, the challenge might make them struggle, but gradually, it increases their resilience, confidence, and wisdom. Just as an athlete cannot become strong by only resting, humans cannot grow without facing the pressures that demand they develop. We cannot always choose what happens to us, but we always have the right to choose how we react. Every problem that appears carries two possibilities. Either it breaks us or it makes us stronger. And what decides that outcome does not lie within the problem itself, but in the attitude, perception, and character we bring when facing it. Because ultimately, life is not measured by the number of challenges we meet, but by the person we become after overcoming them. The tragedy of life is that we get old too soon and wise too late. Benjamin Franklin. We enter life with plenty of time, but little understanding. By the time we have enough understanding to see the nature of things clearly, time is no longer as abundant as before. This is the paradox that makes many people, when looking back, feel a silent regret rising in their hearts. When young, people often live on energy, emotion, and impulsiveness. We believe that time is infinite. A day passing is insignificant, and a year passing is nothing to worry about. We postpone important things, overlook precious relationships, and waste quite a few opportunities just because we think we have so many tomorrows. Youth is like possessing a treasure, but not yet understanding its value. Because we have not yet lost enough, it is hard to recognize what is truly worth cherishing. Because we have not yet gone through enough failure, it is hard to distinguish what is superficial from what is essential. Then, time quietly does its job. Accumulated experiences gradually turn into lessons. Stumbles turn into awareness. Hurts become understanding. After many years, people begin to see life through different eyes. They understand that happiness does not lie in possessing more, but in the ability to cherish what they already have. They understand that the arguments that once kept them awake at night turn out to not be worth worrying about. They understand that time spent with loved ones is far more precious than endless races for fame. But ironically, just as that wisdom appears, they also realize that youth has passed and many opportunities cannot return. This is one of the sources of regret. People do not hurt most because of mistakes they knew were wrong. They hurt because of things they didn't understand well enough at the time to do better. Just as a person only recognizes the value of light after walking through darkness, we usually only fully understand the value of time when we have lost a part of it. Wisdom often arrives like a late guest, bringing answers to questions that youth once struggled to solve. If we know that time is finite, we can live more mindfully, starting today. If we know that wisdom usually comes from experience, we can learn from others instead of paying for every lesson with our own years. If we know that the future will make us look back at the present through different eyes, we will appreciate what we have right now much more. When young, we eagerly turn each page without thinking of the ending. As we mature, we begin to understand the meaning of the past chapters. And when we are wise enough to understand the whole story, we realize the remaining pages are not as many as before. That is what makes this saying carry a gentle sadness while containing a precious lesson. The greatest tragedy is not growing old. Growing old is a natural law. The real tragedy is living without realizing the value of time until too much of it has slipped away. And it is from that very awareness that we are reminded that wisdom should not just be a gift of old age. It should become a companion of the present, so that each day lived becomes deeper, more meaningful, and more memorable.